Hi, I'm Norm Stevens, Economic Development Manager. Joining me today is Vice Mayor Scott Eudey. How are you, Vice Mayor?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for being here. This summer, the city started a new series where we update the authority on current and future economic development efforts in Broken Arrow. One of the main topics this month is discussing the misconception of how the city is intentionally trying to keep retail out of South Broken Arrow. You know, something I hear a lot, and if I hear it, I know you hear it, is we get told, well, none of the city council people live in South Broken Arrow.
Right.
They all live in North Broken Arrow. They don't care anything about South Broken Arrow. And it irritates me a little bit, but then I chuckle because if memory serves me right, you live approximately where?
I live at approximately 111th and Elm, or Florence and Elm. And in fact, just a mile from New Orleans and Elm, and a mile south of New Orleans, south of New Orleans and Elm, and a mile north of the Walmart at 121st or Tucson. I mean, I'm right in the thick of.
You're about as thick in it as you can get.
That's right.
And you've lived there for quite a while.
Gosh, 17 years, yeah.
And you know, one of the other things that people may not know is you've only been on the council, 4 years?
I'm working on my sixth.
6 year. I'm sorry, time flies.
It does.
But this wasn't your first foray into economic development or being a part of the overall vision for our city. You actually spent a lot of time sitting on Chamber of Commerce boards. You're kind of known as the second round of Mr. Rooster days. Tell me some of the things that you did, both with the Chamber and now coming into City Council as Vice Mayor, that is affecting economic development in our city, but even in South Broken Arrow.
Sure. We have, through either with the Chamber or on the Council, I've been working with business owners and property owners in that part of town, 15, 16 years. I served 9 years on the Chamber board. The last year I was for one of those years I was chairman of the board and also served on the Economic Development Corporation. Right. And it's amazing how we would talk about the entire city, but at least 2/3 of the time was spent on South Broken Arrow issues. It was something that it was during that time that the Warren Theater deal was finalized. And
so let me correct you if I can. So it didn't sneak up on you or anybody else that there was some issues with South Broken Arrow and what we were going to have to do to address those issues.
No, I drove by it every day. I watched it happening. I watched what was going on. And early on, I wanted to be proactive and join groups that were proactive about making change happen. I think the problem is economies change, right. Neighborhoods change, people's shopping styles and needs change, and so every development has to adapt to that. And there's just natural ebb and flows to every parts of town. Right. That doesn't mean that it's over. What it means is we have new opportunities to reinvigorate, recreate, and reimagine Absolutely. What a part of town can be.
You know, you're just not paying lip service. I know for the last at least 14 months, you were part of a small group of citizens, and you were representing the council, but you also were representing the citizens on a small committee that examined the New Orleans and Elm and made recommendations to City Council. And you were there every meeting, twice a month. And tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about what you learned by sitting on that committee.
Well, what I learned was, one, the property owners and business owners oftentimes have two very different ideas about what they perceive as what's going on in their world. Property owners, they're renting, they want to provide a positive experience, but they're focused on getting space rent and getting the best price they can for that. Business owners they want a really nice place to do business, but they want it for the cheapest rate possible. Yes. And so those are always at odds with each other. And so what we were able to do with this committee is get property owners, business owners, which are very rarely the same people, in the room and start having communication and realizing, hey, we actually have a lot in common about what we want to see here. So how do we get there?
And forgive me for interrupting, you were able to look at this in a unique perspective, not only as a citizen in that area living there, a resident, not only as a council member and vice mayor, but you also were able to look at this thing through the prism of being a business owner.
Right.
You have owned a business in the Rose District for how many years?
I've been an owner of the business for about 19 years, and I've been in business in the Rose District for 22.
So you know what it takes to run a business.
Right.
You know what it takes to meet payroll. You know what it is to go through this COVID and come out on the other end and survive, if not thrive. Talk a little bit about how that influenced you as you looked at this overall New Orleans and area plan.
Well, as we're talking to these business owners especially, I know what it's like to have to go and say, I need a PPP loan to make sure that I don't lay off my secretary and I don't lay off people in my office. I know what that's like. So I know every one of those folks, especially restaurant owners, but even the retail shop owners who had to close for at least a month until they could figure out how do people come in.
Right.
But especially those restaurants, they were closed 6 weeks. There's no payroll being made. There's jobs being lost. Understanding that and having been on both sides of that, especially having to cut that check or having to decide, do I pay this month?
Right.
That gives you new understanding of what those businesses are going through. Now that even makes it more important as you're sitting on a committee like that and looking at it. I've got to figure out a way to help these folks. We've got to make this work because it's not just, making a part of town nice again. It's not just that. It's making sure that every family who works at those businesses can take food home, can take money home and put food on their tables and pay their mortgages. It impacts every step of our economic viability as a city, our economic success as a city. And frankly, as a city councilor, we want sales tax.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that's the king in Oklahoma. Cities, that's the only way they can fund themselves aside from utilities and GO bonds, and those are limited. Right. So we're at sales tax. I want South Broken Arrow to be as successful as possible. I want us to be more successful than any other part of town. And really, I want every part of town to be equally successful.
Sure.
Because when we're successful, we can pay our police, we can pay our fire, we can pay our utilities. We can do what we have to do. If we're not, we can't.
And talk about that a little bit. You represent a ward, but we really don't have quote unquote ward politics in Broken Arrow.
No.
You represent, even though you're part of a ward, and it's Ward which?
Ward 4.
Ward 4, even though you're part of Ward 4, you represent the city as a whole.
Correct.
You don't just look at one area and say, hey, this is my priority. You are forced to look at the whole city and say, every part of this is my priority.
4 of the 5 city councilors have to live within a ward. And a ward is just almost arbitrarily lines drawn based on the population trends of that census.
So they could change.
They could change in 2 years. And I have to live within the geographic confines of that ward. But the entire city votes for my position. The entire city votes for me. I represent, and I have a duty to all approximately 115,000 people who live, work, and play here. And I have a duty to make sure that the entire city is taken care of. So, and that's why making sure South Broken Arrow is successful is even more important, because I've got to meet that duty everywhere around town. Well, if I'm meeting at 2 other places and not somewhere else, I have work to do.
Right.
Well, I'm up to that work. I'm willing to take on and do whatever it takes to make every part of Broken Arrow a success.
And what is your compensation for all the hours that you put in representing your ward in the city?
Well, it's common these days on Facebook posts to put a little blurb about yourself, and I said, father, friend, and professional volunteer.
That's exactly
because one of the things that city councilors get paid for in our form of government is the city graciously reimburses me for my cell phone usage.
Right.
And other than that, I do this out of a desire to serve my community.
And that is the reason that you agreed to get so involved with Rooster Days. You
Right.
agreed to get so involved with the chamber. And then you agreed to get so involved as a city council person.
Well, if you're going to expect a city to help to help you make a living so that you can put food on the table in your family and so that you can pay your mortgage, you need to be ready to invest back into that community. And I'm not smart enough to do a lot of things, but I can give time.
That's absolutely
And
right.
I'm willing to give time, and I'm willing to do things and expend that time to make our city successful.
Counselor, I cannot tell you how pleased and how proud I am to get to spend a few minutes with you. I have much respect to you, sir. Much respect to all the council for the things they do to make our city better. And you should feel proud of yourself for all that you've given.
Well, thank you. That respect is mutual. There's no one better for this job than you, and I'm glad you're doing it. And I'm glad that our citizens are getting these updates so that they can see all the hard work going into making the entire city a success.
That is fantastic. Due to all the great feedback, we decided to put this section of the beta video and share it directly with you. Here's the clip. Number 5 is the city is intentionally trying to keep retail out of South Broken Arrow. That is a complete delusion. Of all the comments that I've ever had sent to me, that is the one that I just shook my head. Let me tell you what we have done. Over the past 10 years, city and chamber staff have dedicated significantly greater amount of resources to recruit retail, restaurants, and fitness centers to South BA as compared to the rest of the city. Over the past 10 years, I've attended ICSC in Texas and Las Vegas. ICSC, as you know, is the foremost conference for retail real estate. Each year, most, if not all, of my visits are dedicated towards site selectors to push South Broken Arrow to them. Each year, we present the information in a grounds for development that our Broken Arrow Economic Development Corporation does. As you can see, for 2017, the cover was dedicated to the Warren Theater. For 2019, the cover was dedicated to the shops at Aspen Creek. This one that just came hot off the press, and this is just a first copy, has the Brio on it, and we were trying to get something from New Orleans Square, but we couldn't get a picture that we thought would work the best. So I went ahead and said, hey, use the Brio on it. We'll push that out. But there are 7 separate pages in this publication dedicated to South Broken Arrow. When I go to these conferences, South Broken Arrow is what I am pushing. I spend very little time at ICSC discussing North Broken Arrow. There's no need to. Site selectors know what North Broken Arrow has. It knows about the density. It knows about the ease to Tulsa. It knows about the traffic counts. They have most of the necessary shopping. Yes, Dick's Sporting Goods and Sprouts came as a result of my visits to ICSC, but they were first shown South Broken Arrow and decided to locate in North Broken Arrow. In a 60-day period this year, members of the Tourist and Economic Development Department under the City Manager's Office sent out and met with over 6 representatives from in the 60-day period earlier this year, members of TED team met with representatives from 4 separate national health club chains about locating a facility in South Broken Arrow in the former Research Building. Representatives from VASA, who I talked to them on several occasions, remain consistent in their BA is the only part of the city they are considering for a new location, even after significant incentives were discussed. Recently, a member of the TED team drove to corporate headquarters of a large furniture store in an effort to recruit them to South Broken Arrow. After touring Broken Arrow, they are in the process of securing a site in the northern part of our city. As mentioned in previous presentation, representatives from the City of BA and the Chamber of Commerce have met with, exchanged information with, or provided recruitment information to dozens of supermarket chains about the benefit of locating in South Broken Arrow. I've personally met with site selectors for Home Depot over the past 10 years. During that time, conversations were strong, then they backed off. The last time I talked with them, which was 1.5 years or 2 years ago, they said that Home Depot had changed their model at that point and that they were only going to build 5 new stores in all of the United States. All 5 of those stores were going to be located in Florida. A couple of years ago, representatives from the City of Broken Arrow, including City Manager Michael Spurgeon, and representatives from the Broken Arrow Chamber of Commerce drove to Oklahoma City and spent the day for the specific purpose of recruiting Heyday Sports to the shops at Aspen Creek. After a considerable amount of time and effort was spent in those recruitment efforts, they decided to put a new store in Texas instead of locating one in Oklahoma. In 2019, while attending ICSC in Texas, I met with a real estate broker for Price Edwards. That person was a site selector for Academy. I spent a considerable amount of time with that person, pushing the need for Academy to be located in South Broken Arrow. Those talks eventually failed and they didn't come to Broken Arrow at all at this time. Staff from the city of Broken Arrow has actively recruited two water parks and many motels to South Broken Arrow. The lack of shopping and dining options in South BA may result in citizens driving a couple of miles to the west to shop along the Memorial Corridor. Any thought that staff from the city is not actively pursuing the retail investment in South Broken Arrow, the people must understand, or the people don't understand, that we fund our government primarily off sales tax. And if that sales tax is going to South Broken Arrow, then we would be working against ourselves. If we weren't recruiting it to South Broken Arrow, we're working against ourselves. Based on this fact alone, the very notion that the city does not recruit retail and restaurants to South BA is complete madness. A separate issue is often South Broken Arrow residents fail to support some of the businesses in South Broken Arrow. If you want to continue to have great businesses in South BA, you've got to frequent the businesses in South BA and you've got to spend your money there. It's very, very simple. I'm going to move on to number 6 on the social media misconceptions.
Before you do, Norm, I just want to say there are a lot of good businesses all around the South, especially at New Orleans Square, that are doing very, very well. And I think it's a great point that we need to support those businesses because they made that investment. I think that was brought up at the groundbreaking we had the other day. It was talking about the investments are being made, and you know what? If they're gonna make it, they have to get the people that live here to support them.
Yep. Yes, sir. You're exactly right. That is exactly correct. Item number 6, or the 6th one, is if you build it, they will come. You know, this is a concept that I hear a lot, and retailers don't want to be where growth is going. Retailers want to be where growth is. A perfect example is the Warren Theater. When we recruited the Warren Theater and we did the shops at Aspen Creek, I honestly believe, that by recruiting a world-class theater, somewhat $40 million worth of theater to South Broken Arrow, that the retail would come in around it. Since that time, we all know there's been very, very little retail come in around it. Now, a difference in that type of concept is Bass Pro. Bass Pro was such a significant retail attraction that when it located in the north part of our city, it started to fill in what seemed like almost immediately. The difference is the traffic counts on the Broken Arrow Expressway compared to the Creek Turnpike. The Broken Arrow Expressway on any given day will have 97,500 cars going up and down it. During the same time period in the same section of the Creek Turnpike, you will have 13,000 cars. If you're a retailer, where do you want to locate your business? 98,000 cars or 13,000 cars? It's really quite simple. Also, big box stores and grocery stores first of all, big box stores aren't locating anywhere. But grocery stores have a reluctance to open next to theaters. So that is another reason that nothing came into the shops of Aspen Creek as far as a grocery store. In upcoming presentations, you'll hear me discuss how developers have a herd mentality, or the tendency to follow and copy what other investors are doing. That's it for this edition of the BA Economic Development Impact Report. Thanks for tuning in. And if you have any suggestions or would like something specific mentioned in a future monthly report, please call or send me an email. Until next time, I hope you will continue shopping local and be amazed at what our city has to offer.